The text message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, just as the rain began to streak the kitchen windows, blurring the silhouette of the old oak tree in the backyard. It read, "You need to stop financially abusing my husband. Your greed is suffocating our new family, Sarah, and it ends now." I sat at the wooden dining table, the screen's harsh glow illuminating the chipped ceramic mug between my hands. I was 42 years old, a woman who had spent the last 3 years meticulously rebuilding a life from the wreckage of a 20-year marriage. The sender was Chloe, the 26-year-old woman my ex-husband, David, had married exactly 6 months after our divorce was finalized. Hearing her accuse me of financial abuse didn't make me angry initially, it brought a cold, hollow wave of confusion. For nearly 2 decades, David and I had lived a life defined by predictable, quiet routines. We shared a modest 3-bedroom home, raised our teenage daughter, Maya, and ran a small, independent hardware supply business that my father had started 30 years ago. David had been the face of the shop, gregarious, charming, always ready with a joke for the contractors. I was the spine, tucked away in the back office, managing the inventory, balancing the ledgers, and ensuring the taxes were paid on time. I preferred the quiet precision of numbers. When the marriage dissolved, not with an explosive fight, but with the slow, agonizing realization that David had checked out long before he actually packed his bags, we agreed to a clean break. I kept the house and the business, which was built on my family's land, and he took a substantial cash buyout, his choice of the vehicles, and a clean slate. The transition was lonely but peaceful. Maya and I adjusted to the quieter house, the scent of lavender replacing the heavy musk of David's cologne. My days became structured around the store's opening hours and cooking simple dinners for my daughter. But beneath the surface of David's new, seemingly perfect life with Chloe, the gears were shifting. The cash buyout he insisted on, money meant to secure his future, was treated like a lottery win rather than a finite safety net. It started subtly, a luxury SUV parked in his new driveway, social media posts of weekend getaways to tropical resorts, and designer clothes replacing his flannel shirts. I watched from a distance, saying nothing, focusing entirely on keeping my own ledger balanced. But numbers never lie, and a heavy silence began to settle over David's interactions with our daughter whenever money was mentioned. The subtle shifts soon grew into undeniable patterns. It started when Maya came home from a weekend visit at her father's new suburban townhouse, her eyes fixed on her sneakers. She mentioned, almost casually, that David had asked her to start buying her own gas for the car we shared, claiming things were a bit tight this month because of the business transition. A week later, David's child support payment, the modest, court-mandated amount we had agreed upon to cover Maya's college fund and health insurance, was 5 days late. When I gently texted him a reminder, his reply was short, clipped, and uncharacteristic, "You're running a successful business, Sarah. You can cover her for a few days without hounding me." I didn't push. I knew the retail hardware landscape was shifting, and perhaps his new ventures weren't taking off as quickly as his lifestyle demanded. But then came the afternoon Chloe stepped into my store. I was at the counter, counting out change for an old contractor, when the bell above the door chimed. Chloe walked in, the heels of her designer boots clicking loudly against the worn linoleum floor. She didn't look at the tools or the paint samples, she marched straight toward me, her eyes flashing with a mix of defensive pride and underlying panic. "We need to talk about the alimony, Sarah," she said, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper so the customers wouldn't hear. "David is stressed every single night because of the amount you drain from his bank account. It's not fair that we are sacrificing our future just so you can maintain this lifestyle." I looked down at my faded denim apron, then back up at her young, unlined face. There was no alimony. David and I had waived it entirely in the divorce decree because he had taken the lump sum cash payout from the business instead. But as I looked at the genuine resentment burning in Chloe's eyes, the truth clicked into place. David hadn't told her about the buyout money. He had spent it all on their lavish wedding, the new cars, and the tropical vacations, and now that the well was dry, he was blaming his financial strain on his greedy ex-wife to save face. He was using me as a scapegoat to hide his own financial recklessness from his new bride. The silence in the store grew heavy, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan overhead. I kept my voice measured, refusing to match Chloe's defensive heat with anger. Chloe, I said softly, leaning slightly over the wooden counter, I think you need to look at the actual divorce decree. There is no alimony. David took his half of the business in a single, large cash payout 3 years ago. The only money he sends me is for Maya's college savings, and even that has been late. Chloe's face went pale, her posture stiffening. For a second, a flicker of doubt crossed her eyes, but she quickly masked it with anger. That's a lie, she snapped, her voice trembling slightly. David told me you forced him out of the family business and that he's still paying for your mistakes. You're just trying to turn me against him. She turned on her heel and stormed out, the store bell jingling violently behind her. That evening, the text messages started. David called me repeatedly, and when I didn't answer, he sent a barrage of furious texts, accusing me of interfering in his marriage and trying to ruin his life. What happens between me and Chloe is none of your business, one message read. Asterisk, you had no right to talk to her about our past financial arrangements. Asterisk. I realized then that David's pride was a dangerous thing. To keep up the illusion of the wealthy, successful older man who could provide a life of luxury, he had woven a web of lies, and he was willing to let our daughter suffer the consequences. The next morning, Maya received a text from her father stating he couldn't contribute to her upcoming semester's tuition because of unexpected expenses caused by her mother. Seeing my daughter's tear-stained face as she held out her phone was the breaking point. I had stayed quiet to keep the peace, to protect David's relationship with Maya, and to move on with my dignity intact. But his pride was now actively harming our child. I sat Maya down at the kitchen table, poured her a glass of warm milk, and told her gently that her tuition would be paid, no matter what. Then, I went to my office and pulled the certified copy of our divorce agreement, along with the bank records showing the exact wire transfer of his buyout money, out of the safe. It was time for the truth to be spoken in the light. I arranged the meeting at a quiet diner on the edge of town, a neutral place where the clatter of porcelain and the low murmur of strangers would force us to keep our tempers in check. I arrived early, the envelope sitting flat on the vinyl booth seat next to me. When David and Chloe walked in, the tension between them was palpable. David looked exhausted, his shoulders hunched inside his jacket, while Chloe walked a step behind him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, refusing to meet my eyes. They sat down across from me. Before David could speak, before he could launch into another defensive script about how I was ruining his new life, I pushed the envelope across the laminated table. I'm not here to argue, I said, my voice steady, carrying the quiet weight of a woman who had nothing left to hide. And I'm not here to break up your marriage. But I will not allow my daughter's education to be used as a bargaining chip for your pride, David. Chloe looked at the envelope, then at David. His face had gone completely gray. With trembling fingers, Chloe pulled out the documents. There it was, in black and white, the signed divorce decree explicitly waiving alimony, alongside the certified bank transfer showing the exact lump sum of $250,000 paid directly to David's account 3 years prior. The silence that followed was diaphasic. Chloe read the pages twice, her eyes moving rapidly across the signatures. When she finally looked up at David, the anger that had been directed at me for weeks had completely evaporated, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking realization. You spent it all, she whispered, her voice cracking. The wedding, the trips, the car, you told me it was your current income. You told me she was draining you. David couldn't look at her. He stared down at his coffee cup, his hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. In that moment, the illusion of the wealthy, provider husband shattered completely. He wasn't a victim of an aggressive ex-wife, he was a man who had traded his daughter's future and his own financial stability for a temporary display of luxury. The tuition needs to be paid by Friday, David, I said gently, gathering my coat. Not for my sake, but for Maya's. You took your share of the past. Now you need to honor your responsibility to her future. I stood up and walked out into the cool evening air, leaving them to face the truth they had both tried so hard to avoid. Within 48 hours, the full tuition amount was transferred to Maya's college account. I later learned from Maya that David had sold the luxury SUV and that he and Chloe had moved out of the suburban townhouse into a modest apartment closer to his work. Life in my quiet home returned to its peaceful rhythm. The ledger at the hardware store remains balanced, but more importantly, the emotional ledger of my life is finally clear. I learned that you cannot protect someone from the consequences of their own choices, especially when those choices begin to harm the people you love. Strength doesn't mean bearing someone else's secrets, it means standing firmly in the truth and letting the pieces fall where they must. Sometimes, the hardest part of moving on isn't letting go of the person, it's letting go of the need to protect their reputation at the expense of your own peace. For years, I thought keeping David's secrets was a form of grace. But true grace doesn't require you to carry the weight of someone else's lies, especially when that weight begins to crush your children. Today, the hardware store is thriving, and Maya is focusing on her studies without the shadow of financial uncertainty hanging over her head. I look at the ledger books now, and I see more than just numbers. I see the value of honesty, boundaries, and self-respect. We cannot control the stories people tell about us in the dark, but we can always choose to live so clearly that the truth speaks for itself when it finally comes to light. Thank you for sitting with me today and listening to my story. It means the world to have you here in this corner of our community. Before you go, I want to ask you, have you ever had to step back and let someone face the consequences of their own choices, even when it was painful to watch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story spoke to your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to Dad's Strength Stories so we can keep sharing these moments of truth together. Take care of yourselves, and remember, your peace is always worth protecting.